We'll start today by, of course, opening Adobe Photoshop. This is the interface. If you look across the top, you've got your kind of standard menus across the top, right up here. Right below that these are the actual tool menus. So as the tool changes down here on the side, we've got different tools on in the toolbar here. As we change tools, you'll notice this menu up at the top changes to reflect the properties for that particular tool. It's very useful to remember that, because as we start using some of these tools, these settings will become more important. Okay, so we've got the tool settings properties bar right here. Right below that, to the left side of the screen, is our toolbar. We're going to be using several of these tools right here in the top, these top 4 tools, and then the 5th tool right here, that is the crop tool, which some of you probably have already used. On the right side over here, we have our layers palette. All right, that's our other critical function that we're going to be looking at while we work today. The history palette is also something that's very useful to you. We'll talk about the history palette as we get to it. It simply flies in and out by this little button right here. All right, so this is basically what we need to know about the interface for Photoshop. Let's start by opening up a file. I've placed a file in each of your folders, or your instructor has placed a file in each of your folders. It may be this file. I use this particular file. It's the butterfly file. So I'm going to click on it. I'm going to open it. Now, if your file happens to open up in Adobe Camera Raw, most of you are familiar with Adobe Camera Raw, all you need to do is simply go down here to the Open Image button in the lower right hand corner and click on it, and that will open the image up in Photoshop. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop. I'm just going to assume that most of you don't really know anything about Photoshop. Some of you have had classes in Photoshop, and I think that some of the things I'm going to talk to you about might be just a little bit different than you're used to. Photoshop is one of those programs where there are probably about at least 3, 4, maybe half a dozen different ways to do every single task. So this is, even if you feel like you know how to do all of this stuff, I just ask you to pay attention, because you might actually learn something new. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about how to navigate your image in Photoshop. One thing that you might want to be able to do is zoom in and out of your image. This is pretty small. This is kind of not filling up my window very good. So I want to enlarge it. I want to make it bigger, so that if I go and want to do a really close, accurate outline of this butterfly, I can do it up closer. It's much, much easier to do. There are several ways you can zoom in. If I use my keyboard, at the top of my keyboard, if I simply hit the Control plus, all right, you can zoom in that way. Control minus, the top of the keyboard, will zoom out. That's okay, and sometimes when you're working with a certain tool, that works the best. But most of the time, if you just hold the Alt button down and scroll with your mouse scrolling button, you can zoom in and out very nice, very smoothly. It's not the big jumps that you get with the Control plus or Control minus key. All right, once you get zoomed in, you might actually want to move around. Well, a lot of people want to come over here to the sides and grab these little scroll bars and kind of pan them up and down, and come down here to the bottom one and then move that back and forth. That's okay, but it's just inefficient. The best way to do it is if I hold the space bar down, you'll see my cursor changes to a little hand, and I can actually pan around. All right, so the Alt key is a modifier key which allows you to zoom in and out using the scroll bar. All right, so let's just zoom out, and the space bar allows you to pan your image around when you're zoomed in. If I'm zoomed all the way out, now when I pan, it's not going to do anything, because it doesn't need to move, because the whole image is in the work area. However, if I zoom in, now if I hold the space bar down, I will pan the image around, because it's bigger, and it actually takes more space than I've got showing here. So the Alt scroll to zoom in and out, and the space bar to pan around once you get zoomed in. Those are just a couple of quick things that are useful to know in Photoshop for navigating. You'll notice that when I opened up this image over here in the layers palette in the right hand side, you'll see that I've got a background image. It's currently locked, and that's okay. And there's a little eyeball here. The little eyeball, all right, right there on the screen, that simply turns the visibility for the layer on and off. Now what's important to understand is you can turn that visibility on and off if I click on it. So if I turn the visibility off and on, that little eyeball appears and disappears. When it's on, that means there's visibility. If I turn it off, that's turn the visibility for this layer off. Okay. Now the difference, there's a couple things that you need to know about this, and that one is sometimes this layer will be active and the visibility is on, but you can turn the visibility off and the layer can still be active. We'll see that in just a minute. Let's go over here to the left hand side. The top tool right up here is the move tool. If I hover over it, you'll see a little label will come out and it'll say move tool. You'll notice that there's a shortcut key V. If I push the V button, if I have any tool open except the text tool. If I have any other tool open, I can hit the V key and it'll take me to the move tool. The move tool we're going to use, and I'm going to show you that in just a minute. But for now, we're talking about selections. So let's just go through the selections one at a time. First of all, if I hover over this one, it's going to tell me that this is the rectangular marquee tool. Now when you look at yours, it may look like this or it may look like this. It may be a circle or it may be a rectangle. Okay? If you click and hold over this, you'll see that this little flyout menu comes. It opens up the dialog box that shows you that there's a rectangular marquee tool, there is an elliptical marquee tool, a single row marquee tool, and a single column marquee tool. Let me tell you just as a side, I've been using Photoshop since about 1990, roughly 1990, 1991, and that's when it first came available for the IBM. It was originally made for the Mac only. Well, since in all that time that I've used Photoshop, I have never once used the single row or the single column marquee tool. So, to that end, I'm not going to talk about those two. Other than what I've just said, we're going to talk about the rectangular marquee tool and the elliptical marquee tool. Also notice M. Again, if you're in any tool other than the text tool and you type M, it will take you to whichever these tools is currently active. So we're going to go to the rectangular. All right. Now, when I say marquee, some of you don't know what marquee means. Marquee simply means I click and hold my mouse button down and click and drag. I click and simply drag from corner to corner. Now, with the rectangular marquee tool, I can drag it and make it any proportion that I want to make it. All right. So let's say I want a marquee just closely around this butterfly. Well, I drew my marquee. Now I let go of my mouse button. Notice that I'm kind of got this empty space over here. Now there's a couple things I can do. With the selection tool still selected, I can click inside that marquee and I can drag it around. All right. So I can kind of center the butterfly in there, and that's okay. But what I really want to do is I want to get it really close to as close to the butterfly as I can. So to that end, I'm going to another hotkey real quick. Control D, D as in dog. Control D. If I click Control D, it deselects. So whenever there's a marquee out there and you want to get rid of it, Control D, deselects. Okay, another hotkey. So I can start. Okay, let's say I want to get it closer. So I'm going to move it about here, the cursor, and I'm going to drag down and drag it over. Now the problem is I kind of missed it at the top. The top of my marquee is just catching the edge, so I can actually drag it and move it and get it pretty close. Still not close enough. All right, what's my other option? I'm going to do Control D, deselect, and I'm going to click and just start dragging. Now, without letting go of the mouse button, I'm still dragging. I'm going to simply hold the space bar down. This allows me to move it. Now again, I'm still holding my mouse button down. I'm still making the marquee. This just kind of interrupts the making of the marquee until I get it positioned where I want. I let go of the space bar. Now I can continue my marquee because I haven't let go of the mouse button until I get it just like that. Now I'm very close to all the edges of the butterfly. That's about as close as I can get with the rectangular marquee tool. Okay. Now that we have our marquee, our rectangular marquee on our image, we simply are going to hold on the Control key, press the C key for copy, Control C. That's a good hotkey to remember. If you don't know Control C already, that's a good one to learn. Control C is copy. It works not only in Photoshop, but it works in all of your Windows applications. Control C copies to the clipboard, and then Control V, as in Victor, right next to the C, pastes. Now I want you to notice on your screen when you do that, over here in the right hand side, in the layers palette, excuse me, in the layers palette, you actually create a new layer. If I turn off the visibility on the bottom layer, layer 0, if I turn the visibility off, you'll see this is my selection. All right. This is where I made the selection, then I copied it, then I pasted it. Alright, what I want you to do is I want you to turn on your computer, or if it's already on, just turn your monitor on, and I want you to go ahead and open up the butterfly image, and I want you to make a rectangular or a square selection of the butterfly as close to the edges as you possibly can. I want you to copy it and paste it so that you end up with two layers, layer 0, which is the full image, and layer 1, which is the selected image.